In the spring of 2005, a biologist named Peter Sharp rappels down a cliff face on Santa Cruz Island, off the coast of Southern California. Above him, the parents are circling and screaming. Inside the nest is a single eaglet, 8 weeks old. In a few hours, it will be banded, boxed, and carried by boat to a hack tower built specifically to raise it here, on an island that hasn't held a breeding bald eagle since the 1950s. Sharp works for the Institute for Wildlife Studies, and this is not the first time he's done this. It won't be the last. But nobody on his team yet knows whether the bird he's holding right now will survive its first winter, whether it will breed, or whether the whole plan will even work. Nobody was filming this. There was no camera crew waiting at the bottom of the cliff. It was a guy on a rope, a box, and a boat schedule to keep. This bird, and the roughly 60 others like it that will follow over the next 4 years, is being brought back for a reason that has almost nothing to do with the bald eagle itself. The real subject of this story is a much smaller animal, the island fox. What connects the two of them is a chain of cause and effect that ecologists call a trophic cascade, and it's about to run in reverse. Because bringing the bald eagle back to these islands was never really the goal. The goal was saving something else entirely, an animal that had never once been the bald eagle's prey. The island fox is found on 6 of the 8 Channel Islands, and nowhere else on Earth. It's small enough to fit in 2 hands. A relative of the mainland gray fox shrunk down by thousands of years of island life into one of the smallest canids on the planet. For most of its history, its biggest threat was itself. Too many foxes, not enough food, an island running its own math. Bald eagles shared the sky with it for millennia and never touched it. Bald eagles eat fish, almost exclusively. A fox was never on the menu, and for thousands of years that arrangement simply held. Before the 1950s, at least 24 pairs of bald eagles nested across these islands. Then, a company called Montrose Chemical Corporation, operating out of a plant in Torrance, California, began discharging waste from its DDT manufacturing process through the county sewer system into the Pacific, off the Palos Verdes shelf. Over roughly 2 decades, an estimated 1,700 tons of the pesticide entered the ocean. It worked its way up the food chain into the fish the eagles were eating, thinning their eggshells until the shells collapsed under a nesting parent's own weight. By the 1950s, the bald eagle had stopped breeding on the Channel Islands. Within a few more decades, it was gone entirely, and the sky above these islands sat empty of its original owner for the first time in longer than anyone could measure. An empty niche rarely stays empty for long. Sometime in the 1990s, golden eagles, Aquila chrysitos, started showing up on the islands, something that had almost never happened before. They came for a reason. Ranchers had introduced pigs, sheep, and other livestock to several of the islands over the previous century, and the feral descendants of those animals were now roaming loose, an easy meal for a bird with a wingspan over 7 feet. Golden eagles hunt on land, not water, and once they were established here, a 5-pound fox was simply too easy to pass up. The collapse that followed happened faster than anyone tracking it expected. On San Miguel and Santa Rosa Islands, fox numbers fell to around 15 animals apiece by the year 2000. On Santa Cruz, they dropped below 80. 15 animals, on an island. That's not a population anymore. That's a waiting list. In 2004, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service listed 4 island fox subspecies under the Endangered Species Act. Here's the part that should have made this simple. Remove the golden eagles, bring the bald eagles back, and the fox recovers on its own. In practice, it took 3 separate efforts running at the same time, coordinated across Channel Islands National Park, the Nature Conservancy, which owns most of Santa Cruz Island, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and any one of these 3 efforts, on its own, could have failed and taken the whole plan down with it. The first was direct removal. Wildlife biologists trapped golden eagles across the northern islands, 1 bird at a time, and flew them out to the far side of the Sierra Nevada, well outside their old hunting range. 44 birds were relocated this way over the course of the program. Telemetry studies tracking their movements afterward found that almost none of them ever made it back. The second targeted the reason the golden eagles had come at all. Feral pigs were systematically removed from Santa Cruz Island and introduced deer and elk from Santa Rosa, cutting off the food source that had drawn the wrong eagle into this airspace in the first place. Without the pigs, there was simply less reason for a golden eagle to bother stopping here on its way to somewhere else. The third was Sharp's work, bringing the bald eagle home. Between 2002 and 2006, biologists gathered eaglets from healthy mainland nests, raised them in island hack towers until they were old enough to hunt on their own, and released them into a sky that hadn't held one of their kind for half a century. 61 bald eagles went out this way, funded in part by a $140 million settlement California, and the federal government had won against Montrose Chemical 5 years earlier, money extracted from the same company whose chemical waste had emptied this sky out in the first place. The peregrine falcon, hit by the same DDT and the same settlement money, was being restored on these islands at almost the same time, though that recovery is its own story. None of the three pieces alone would have worked. Losing the pigs without bringing back the bald eagles just leaves a vacant territory open for the next golden eagle passing through. Removing golden eagles without giving the fox time to recover just delays the same collapse by a few seasons. The entire plan depended on all three landing in roughly the same window, on an island where nobody could fully control any of the variables, and for a long stretch, nobody involved could honestly promise it would come together in time. Then, in 2006, biologists on Santa Rosa Island documented something that hadn't been engineered into any proposal or funding request. A bald eagle, born from that very reintroduction, escorting a golden eagle off the island. Not a study result, not a modeled projection. A bird doing what bald eagles do when they consider a stretch of coastline theirs, and defending it against exactly the intruder biologists had spent years trying to remove by hand. That same year, on Santa Cruz, the first eaglets hatched without a single human hand involved in the process. No banding team, no hack tower, no biologist rappelling down a cliff face to check on the nest. They just hatched, the way bald eagles on these islands had for thousands of years before a plant in Torrance ever discharged a gallon of waste 60 miles away. Sharp kept climbing those cliffs for years afterward, but the reason had changed. He wasn't placing eaglets into hack towers anymore. He was counting nests the birds had built entirely on their own, in places no biologist had chosen for them, and confirming one climb at a time that the population no longer needed the program that had created it. The fox recovery followed almost as fast as the collapse had arrived. Vaccination programs handled outbreaks of canine distemper before they could spread. Native brush, no longer trampled flat under feral pigs, grew back thick enough to hide a fox from anything still flying overhead looking for an easy meal. By 2016, just 12 years after the endangered listing, 3 of the 4 island fox subspecies were removed from it entirely. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the fastest recovery of any mammal in the history of the Endangered Species Act. Not every island fox was fighting the same enemy. On Santa Catalina, further south, the threat that same era wasn't a golden eagle at all. It was canine distemper, likely carried ashore by a stowaway raccoon in 1999, which crashed that population from around 1,300 animals to roughly 100 in less than a year. Different cause, same species, same urgency, and a recovery that had to be fought on its own separate front. It's worth sitting with how strange that timeline actually is, because most endangered species recoveries measure progress in decades, and this one didn't. 12 years is barely enough time for a fox pup born the year the listing happened to have grandchildren of its own, and by the time those grandchildren were being counted by biologists, doing routine population surveys, 3 of the 4 subspecies had already qualified to come off the list. Not because the danger disappeared on its own, but because every piece of the plan, the eagle removal, the pig eradication, the reintroduction, the vaccination campaigns, happened to land close enough together in time that none of them undid what the others were building. Biologists have a term for an animal whose presence holds an entire system together the way the bald eagle does here. Ecologist Robert Payne coined it in the 1960s, studying starfish on the coast of Washington state. A keystone species. Remove one, and everything downstream quietly comes apart over years, sometimes decades, before anyone even notices the cause. Put it back, deliberately and at real cost, and the rest of the system seems to remember almost immediately how to hold itself up again. Golden eagles still pass over the Channel Islands from time to time, drifting across on their way somewhere else. When they do, they find the airspace already held by a resident that was never going to yield it back, built from 61 birds that had no guarantee of surviving their first winter. Somewhere below, on ground that supported only 15 foxes a generation ago, one is walking territory that, this time, actually belongs to it.